And we are live. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Hi.
Thanksgiving special. Hi, Thanksgiving special today. Awesome. Hi, Sandra. Hi,
Hi, how are you?
everybody. Welcome to another episode of FreudenFreude's weekly live stream. Yes. So, Sandra, you actually proposed this topic for today. Do you want to talk a second about it?
Yes. Okay. So we're going to talk about showing up and the concept of perfection. So showing up. Okay. So I did a little bit of showing up today in my LinkedIn and on my website. And what it means is to put yourself out there. And it is showing up for others, but especially for yourself, what it means, how it defines you morally, how it defines you also professionally, and the things that it can do just by showing up, right? You don't need to do much. And then the concept of perfection is that as a ADD person, I am very meticulous, very perfectionist in many things, which makes me not want to put out material to the world. And so I have to think about it. And Claudia is also a recovering perfectionist, or at least that's what I think she's recovering.
There you go. Yeah, so I come from an engineering and mathematics background and from a very perfectionist father's upbringing. So yeah, I mean, it was a journey. And now I'm recovering. Exactly. I'm a survivor. There you go. Yes, high five. So it's a process. So again, it's good news because it can change. You can change the way that you view this. There's mindset shifts that you can take to maybe free yourself a little bit from this clasp of perfectionism that you can't ever really reach this ideal. Does that mean that I'm not striving to do the best job that I can do, that I'm not striving to be fully present and show up? No, that's not what it means. But I think it's allowing myself for a bit more acceptance, a bit more freedom, a little bit more peace. Okay, so that's essentially what it is. I'm not doing it for others. I'm doing it for my own mental wellness, essentially. I agree with what you said earlier, Sandra. Those things are all part of showing up, but I really think it's just literally showing up, like literally sitting in a meeting, literally doing a thing that you promised yourself to do on a very bare bones tactical, I need to have this 5 seconds of willpower to actually do it kind of thing, right? It doesn't always need to be this big moral overarching value-based thing. Sometimes it's really like, I'm not giving into this excuse. And actually, we talked about it last week as we were thinking about which topic to take. Is that tomorrow's Thanksgiving here? That's also why I threw my green screen up there and put a picture up. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, so it's just us two beauties today here in the audience because most people are traveling, and that's fine. We could have definitely used this Thanksgiving tomorrow excuse to maybe not do this meeting today or whatever. Excuses, you can always find them if you look for them. And your brain sometimes, because of whatever reason, and maybe we can get into it a little bit later, is very attuned to finding reasons not to do things. And so I think that the showing up for me, first and foremost, is really the showing up. Put on your coat and go to a meeting, pick up the phone and call this person, go into a Zoom, or just with your own self, respect a promise that you did with yourself to work on something or to take some time out as well, show up for that as well. So that's maybe a little bit more fundamentally where I come from in this as well.
I mean, everything you said is obviously, well, for me, it's a big connection, right? Because showing up and having that push to be present, like you were saying, in a meeting and sitting down and having that willpower to say, I'm going to stick through it and I'm going to be present. Well, I think about personality types. I think about how certain neurological things happen to us that make us think that either we can or cannot make it. So, for example, there's the people that have social anxiety, and they are the ones that are enjoying the pandemic's gift to the world, where it was, you're now going to be able to work from home, right? So showing up can also be on video and also be here, like we're doing, like Claudia was saying. So we could have, like she said, we could have used the excuse of Thanksgiving, but here we are, because showing up for ourselves, for me, has a moral connotation, because it's kind of like putting like a little bonus on my moral bank, where when I show up for myself, I'm living into my values, where one of my values happens to be to show up, right, for myself. Because when you show up, it gives you the opportunity, unexpected, to help someone at some point. There's always someone that needs just your presence, your words, if you know how to, help that person at that moment, or just be of service to someone, which is what we do as coaches. We are of service. You show up, you never know who needs you. So that's what I come up with, that moral plane, you're adding into your little moral bank account. So always think about the next one that we're going to talk, which is withdraw. When you withdraw from your moral bank account, what does that mean? And how can you salvage that moment so that you can gain points? What do you think about it?
Because I mean, definitely, if you don't show up, if you succumb to that excuse, it's too good to pass up, and you just don't do it, you haven't done it, you haven't you had no chance. It's like in sales they say, if you do not ask, the answer is always no. And this is kind of the same thing. If you don't show up, the answer is always no growth, no connection, no contribution, no opportunity, whatever it ends up being. And especially in so many of the endeavors that we do, where we have to become self-accountable, because there's nobody standing behind us forcing us to do something. And on top of it, the rewards or potential rewards are either unclear or long into the future. Right? So then it's very easy to say, oh, but I can spend that hour binge watching Netflix, or I can spend that hour not being uncomfortable talking, having this challenging conversation with this one person that I can't stand. So those are things in the moment that we want to escape from. And in our brains, the way that we are wired, those outweigh potential lack of rewards or potential missed opportunities, or even punishment. Punishment is a strong word, but negative effects that are a little bit further into the future. The now is always in our animal self so much more important than the future kind of benefits or drawbacks. So that is something to be aware of, that the time horizon plays of the opportunity versus short-term avoidance really does play into that. So it's showing up. It's really easy to not do it. It's easy to not do it. We might feel tired. And then, oh my God, of course, the second part of this whole discussion is the whole perfectionism thing. If then we have this idea that our contribution is not going to be enough unless it's perfect, oh, we have the most perfect built-in excuse, because it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. So, don't start that project because you're not going to be able to do it perfectly. Not on time, not on budget, not with the right people, not to the right extent. You don't have the money, you don't have, so it's not going to be how you want it. So let's not even do it. So don't even show up for this part that could be an integral part of your career or whatever. Just don't even start it. That's also a way of not showing up. And it goes from the very small, the next 5 minutes kind of not showing up, to not showing up in life. Don't get married because it won't go like that. Don't take that career because you won't be able to assume this leadership role perfectly, or because that team is not what you in your head define as perfect, because there's this one high performance jerk on the team and therefore it's not perfect, right? So it really transcends all kinds of levels of not showing upness.
Yes, okay.
There you go.
I like
there
that.
you go.
They're showing upness. Okay, well, in that follow-up of the showing upness, I was thinking this, when we are not showing up, we're obviously hiding something, we're protecting something, and you have to question yourself. Here's where coaches come in and we say, okay, what are you protecting? What is going on, right? And so for me, when I wonder, why am I hiding? Most probably it's because I didn't do what I said I was going to do, because it wasn't enough, or I feel that I am not enough, that my knowledge is not enough, right? So I've seen people that are invited to talk in shows and they don't show up because, well, there's many circumstances, but most probably it's because morally, personally, something happened to them, something's going on. So you cannot show up for the rest of the world if you show up for yourself, right? And so you have to think about, for me, it's very important to always ask yourself, what am I protecting? And what am I hiding from? Or who, right? And so I remember so many times when I would never prepare for meetings because I thought I got it. Sometimes we really do think that we have this. And I didn't prepare, and it was devastating. It was, for me, complicated because I realized that they would talk about things that I couldn't understand, when I could have just done my research so that I could feel good with myself. And that would have been just a way to show up, just by having knowledge. You don't need to know all the answers. In fact, you don't need to speak up or say anything, right? Like you were saying, Claudia, you miss out on opportunities by not showing up. You miss out on opportunities of, like they say, being at the right place at the right time, right? That happens when people show up. You never know what's going to happen.
You never know. And the thing also is to oh, you talk about so many different things. So, sometimes I get sidetracked.
Yeah.
I think that it comes down to a fundamental level of confidence. If, your own self-concept and how you can, because it's not showing up, it's also showing yourself, right? So it's this confidence that you have something to contribute, that you have the knowledge. So expertise can factor into that, like you just said. On the other hand, I think that it is very highly related to your level of resilience and your relationship with potential failure, which is what resilience, focuses on. If stuff doesn't go like you want, if there's issues that arise, if there's conflict that arises with other people that you collaborate with, for instance, or whatever, if you lose your train of thought, like I just nearly did, it's how confident are you within yourself that you can keep going? That you can keep going. When you sit in that meeting and you're not 100% prepared, how okay are you to say, to either sit there and be okay with that and take note and learn that, yes, maybe you should prepare more next time, or to actually speak up and say, I have no clue what you guys are talking about, fill me in, please. Yeah. So it's this fundamental confidence, and there's a verbiage I really like, that is to stand in your power. To stand in your power, and also to show up with your whole self, meaning also not putting up this front that takes so much energy. To, if you show up not as yourself, but if you show up as somebody who is expected, as somebody who's fitting in, as somebody who does a job that doesn't really sync with your values and things like that. So a lot from a mindset, self-concept aside, factor in all of that. And sometimes if it's really aspect of somebody's life that they really consistently have trouble showing up for themselves, for others, for family, for the job, for whatever it is, then sometimes coaching is actually really appropriate to go and explore on a level a little bit deeper. This goes deeper than your to-do list. This goes deeper than just knowing your action plan for your goals, which then gets turned into items on your to-do list. This is a fundamental thing in terms of belief systems and mindset and confidence and self-concept, right? And sometimes we, like in Luxembourg, they say we're standing on the hose. We can't see things that are off. We are not aware of our own blind spots. And so sometimes you kind of need a little bit of external, non-judgmental, unbiased help in order to explore this.
Yes. You said something very important, and you made me think about Brené Brown, the queen of empathy. And so she calls it armor. This thing that we have, these layers that you were saying, that we show up ourselves. Well, I saw it as layers. So we show up in one way, in one place, we show up in another way, in another place. And so with every single environment that we are present, we're not showing up as ourselves. And like you said, it's draining, it's exhausting. You cannot keep up with that kind of presence, right? If you want to call it presence, which is not, but for lack of a better word. And I think for me, it's when Brené Brown said that we have an armor, which is, as we grow up, right? As we grow up, we start building layers of who we want to be. We evolve to be how society builds us, how society makes us be, how my family wants me to be, you know, all of these expectations. So we're talking about expectations as well here, which kind of brings up the perfectionist in you, right? Because you want to be accepted, you want to do things right. So that armor is like, don't look at me. This is, you know, if maybe the more I talk, you're going to find me, you're going to discover that I'm a fraud, that I don't know what I'm talking about. So you have, here comes, what's it called, Claudia? The, not perfectionist.
Oh, the imposter syndrome?
Imposter syndrome, exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So here comes the imposter syndrome, which is, boom, you know, kind of a realization of where it comes from, right? Not being authentic. That thing that people say being authentic, I know that a lot of people are like, but what does it mean, for heaven's sakes? Which is just being the same person that you are right now, like Claudia and myself. This is who we are on video, with family, with friends, because there's nothing better than for you to just be this person that you are, that you were born to be, right?
I mean, it's kind of like back in the day we said, what you see is what you get. And those that are our age, they will remember the text editors of yesteryear. It's really that you know, there's no, it's literally like, that's how you show up, and that's who I am. And that doesn't mean that you can't adapt to circumstances. When I talk to a CEO, I maybe talk with slightly different, more less casual language, right? Of course, I'm going to adapt, but I am fundamentally going to stand by my beliefs, by my values. I'm going to, you know, just be myself. I'm not going to become this brown noser or whatever. That's just not in my nature, and that's why I'm not going to do it, right? Either you add value or you don't, and take the consequences for it as well.
Right.
So, because it's like, if you're not authentic and you have these facades, it's like everywhere you go, you play a different role. It's like you're an actor and you're playing all these different roles with their scripts and things like that, and to keep them all straight, and to keep the backstory straight and the arcs of the conversation straight. It's just too much work. So it's just easier to stay in the moment, always true to yourself, and that's good enough. That's good enough. Ultimately, that's what anybody can expect. It doesn't mean that you necessarily fit in everywhere. And sometimes being your best self is a trade-off. You know, you might not fit into every cultural group. You might not fit into every company. The way that you do things might not gel with every group that you're a member of. And then you have to make a decision. Not being yourself, but maybe curbing your behavior a little bit, to the extent that it makes sense for you. I think that's the crux of the matter. Right? If one group is a little bit more outspoken, you might not be as forceful in your communication. That doesn't mean you're going to start lying and saying yes to everything that you don't believe in. But you know, you just adapt, and you make a little bit more context-dependent decisions. But those are choices, just like you make choices not to go. In that case, not showing up means showing up for your authenticity, right? So those are choices. Are we getting too far away from our topic, I wonder?
I would say no, but I would like to cover a little bit of what is the negative, right? And for me, the withdrawal, right? The moral withdrawal for me is, for example, when I don't show up, I am losing trust in people. For example, I know that when I started doing the book club back 2 years ago, my God, it's been so long, 2 years ago, and I was trying to find ways to give value, right? That's the perfectionist side, always trying to find a way to give value. And every single thing had to be important. Every single topic had to be relevant. Everything had to be just right. And I realized that since it wasn't to the quality and to my own expectations in value, I would simply show up for my people, for the people that have put their trust in me. And, I really had hopes that I could do it, but it was so difficult. But sometimes we just make it more difficult because perfectionism is that. We make it even harder and harder each time, when sometimes good enough is enough. And we don't know how to really be true to that word, because sometimes then it comes, the how good it is good enough. And then you start wondering how good is good enough. And you just have to show up. Showing up has to do with the quality of your work. So
yeah, and expectation management, really, that's very important.
exactly.
Being real with what you can expect from yourself and others,
Yeah.
because not only can other people then not trust you, but you cannot trust yourself. And I find that if you give into an excuse and don't show up once, the next time it's already that little bit easier, and then a little bit easier, and in the end you just fall flat and you don't do
That's correct.
anything. And that
correct.
is a huge disservice you can do to yourself. A small little anecdote about not good enough, or good enough. What taught me good enough, incidentally, is event photography.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
When I love studio portraiture. When you do studio portraits as a photographer, you are in control of everything. The light, the setting, the background. I have these huge studio strobes. I can position them just so tailored to the person in front of the camera. You have your backgrounds. You have your camera with just the right focal lens on it and stuff like that. Total control. And then you can really focus on engaging the person, of getting good expressions and things like that. But that's studio photography. That's my baby. But I also did quite a bit of event photography. So it's absolutely the other extreme. You have control over nothing. There's a crowd of people, the background is a mess, the light is, you're like at night in a church or whatever, right? I mean, it's terrible. You can't get to the point that you want to take the picture because you can't. You have the camera that you have at that moment. The focal length that you have, and it's like you have no control. And that teaches you the good enough. Did I get the people? Did I get the expression? Did I get a flair for the ambiance that's happening here? Good enough. Far removed from the perfection of, let's say, or the imagined perfection of a studio portrait. Good enough. And if you then take 10,000 photos like that in a year at events, and you have to get used to just as good enough. Did it get the job done? Will this be enough to, when people look at it next year or 10 years from now, they will remember this moment with these people? That is good enough. And so that taught me a lot, but it was, what can you control at that moment? At that moment, all you can control is how you show up. With the confidence in your technical skills, because I can adjust my camera like in a second, right? And just being there and not forgetting, away from all the technicality of the taking a picture, to be there as a person with the presence, with this photographer that gives you a smile and invites you to maybe be there for the picture. If it's one way, you can maybe set up a group, right? I mean, show up as that. Otherwise, just be in the background and take your pictures of the event as it unfolds. That's all you can do. Show up, do your best. It's good enough. Yeah. So that taught me a lot, actually. That the event photography.
Interesting. I'm thinking about my moment, and I think it was until I started taking some coaching classes, which, well, not classes, but, you know, attending WBEX. And I realized that, number one, you have to be kind to yourself, right? And two, consider that everything you do is a draft. It doesn't have to be final. It doesn't have to be like you're not supposed to do something and expect it to be boom, final, you know, that's it. There's no correction. No, actually you have the opportunity to present it and say, hey, this is a draft. Let's work on it. You need to change something. That is when you want to do something, and putting in your mind the fact that something is not final, it kind of changes your way of seeing things. And number three, or going back to number one, which is being kind to yourself, right? And showing some empathy for yourself, for saying, hey, you know, it wasn't that perfect, but I did it. And let's say, for example, it comes to mind, you know, how some people do presentations. As long as offering value, people don't care, you know, if the image is crooked here, or unless you're a perfectionist. But, you know, people, the audience, what they care is the value that you're bringing into the subject. So, I mean, I don't want to say, but we both know somebody that does presentations and they're kind of cheesy, but they do what they have to do. They teach people. It gets them through a certificate. It does what it needs to do, because it's not the material, it's the product itself of what you're offering, the value that you're offering. Yeah, so that's what comes to mind.
Yeah, very, very good. The reason I looked down earlier, I wanted to remember what WBEX actually stands for the ones that are not familiar with it. It's the World Business and Executive Coaching Summit. Yes. And Sandra and I both are members of that. It's a wonderful initiative of the summit. Every week there's presentations and interactive discussion possibilities to exchange with other executive and business coaches. Yes. And it's a wonderful community. So just wanted to give a heads up to WBEX. Okay. Yes. But I think that one point that I would like to add to your list is just to see things from a growth mindset. Everything, even if it turns out not to be perfect, even if it's a downright failure, okay, there's the word, then it's still an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for learning, and next time around it's going to be better or different. And so that, I think, is also a way, if everything that we do, we get okay with that we're a work in progress, and that you know, unless we risk failure, I mean, literally falling on your face, failure, yes. You're not leaning in enough. You're not taking the risk that can really stretch your comfort zone, that can really teach you a thing or two, that is not just maybe an incremental little thing of putting a dot instead of a semicolon, right? Yeah. So I think that it is something very powerful to be added maybe in this, and you know, fixed mindset, which is the opposite of a growth mindset, is still prevalent. It's still so prevalent that, you know, things are what they are and will always stay the same, and there's not this, you know, if I make a mistake, I am a failure. not in this one particular context. It happened to result in a failure because of a behavior or a situation or a context property. It's like, I am a failure and I'm going to be a failure forever and ever because I'm not able to change. There's still a lot of people that think that way. So everything you do can result in learning. And as long as you do learn and grow and change and adapt, who calls it a failure then? It was maybe an unfavorable outcome, but for the intended purpose. But in the end, as long as you learn from it, it wasn't a failure. You got something out of it in the end. Yeah.
Correct. There's something that I saw while I was reading a book a long time ago, that they say, when you see everything transactional versus transformational, this is what happens, right? You lose sight of what's important, and you lose belief in yourself. And that's the worst thing that you can do, because when you don't feel, like one of the topics that you were talking about before, confident, when you don't feel confident, you lose opportunities, you lose friends, right? Because when you choose to not be present for them in places, to go and show up for a birthday party, to help them with something that they need, you lose opportunities in your friends. It could lead to that as well. You lose job opportunities, right? And so when I think about perfectionism, I think about how I used to make sure that everything was aligned, everything was perfect, my desk was clean. In the meantime, inside I was a mess, right? I was trying to show, I wanted people to see how good I was. I wanted people to evaluate my performance as perfect, impeccable, and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, none of that was happening. None of that was happening because I wasn't showing up for myself. I wasn't clear on my goals. I wasn't clear on my expectations as a person. I didn't have values. I didn't have any of that. I would just let people manage my future. I didn't have control of my future. So it kind of took me to a place where I said, well, being that perfectionist, it doesn't seem like I am that perfectionist, right? Because you start questioning yourself, where are you going? What are you wanting to achieve? And so I realized all of these failures that I had. And so it kind of took me away from that perfectionist person, because it just made sense that I needed to first put myself inside straight before I could actually show up for others. Yeah. So, yeah, that's what it kind of, that's what it taught.
And because even if everything is aligned on your desk and your desk is clean and you're dressed just so and your makeup is just so and stuff like that, if your energy doesn't match, if you're because there's an energetic reflection of who we are inside. Sorry, it's not like aura and woo-woo energy, but it's just a presence. It's not congruent, and then it comes across as fake. And we are very, as human beings, we are very attuned to that.
Yep.
To this is the talk she talks the same that the walk she walks. Yeah, there has to be this one consistent thing. One consistent thing. And it needs to be fitting in your head first. It needs to make sense and be coherent and congruent in your head first, before there's any chance of having a believable outside representation of that. Yeah, just doing outside things is not going to necessarily make it happen. For instance, I'm a very casual person. right? I'm not your quintessential girly girl. I have no interest in shoes and purses and things like that. I have other interests. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm not judging here. I'm just saying for myself, I'm not a girly girl. Putting me into like high-end clothes, even if I were to find some that would fit, mind you, but even putting myself into high-end clothes, I would enjoy it. But mm, I don't know if I would really feel comfortable in it because it's not
Yeah.
congruent with who I really am. I would probably enjoy it, and I might very well get used to it. And if I were to get used to it and it would become part of something that I enjoy and that I feel I deserve or that I feel is representative of a part of me, then that can change. But
Mm.
otherwise, you would just be a donkey in horses' tack. Yeah. and
Yes.
so it needs to fit. It needs to be you. And we see this, we talk to a lot of coaches, Sandra and I, and we see this quite a lot, like when people try to build a coaching practice and they try to figure out what they stand for and who they are and how they position themselves and their own personal brand. People struggle with that because it's not an easy thing to do because you have to dig really deep and figure out what do you really stand for? What do you value? What are your needs regarding to that? How are you going to represent yourself? What are your beliefs about life and the universe? So much comes into that. We're not even going to touch today, I think, on the whole culture bit because the discussion would just explode at this point. And
Yeah.
we're already 40 minutes in. Good going, good going.
Yeah. Okay. So I was thinking about how can people, now that we've talked about perfectionism and what it, where it comes from, at least from our side, from our perspective, our own experience, is there anything that you can give as a good coaching question for somebody to say, this will help me, this at that moment when they're suffering from perfectionism? Is there anything you can tell them, Claudia? Being the most experienced coach.
No, because see, things like that help happen in the moment, and truly there's not one question for every perfectionist client in front of you. It really does depend. But I think fundamentally, what does being a perfectionist give you? And what does not being a perfectionist take away from you? Right? Because if we are perfectionists, then it's because of some reason. What is it? Is it just an introject from early childhood? Is it what does it give you? Just sometimes we can hide behind perfectionism because it's like we said earlier, it's this really great excuse. It's a built-in excuse for not doing something. What do we feel is at risk if we can't be perfect? So it's a tough thing to just pull one out of the bag. It's like, what's the worst that could happen, and could you deal with it? Yeah. What's the worst that could happen? Could you deal with it? What could you learn from it? Is it in the context of your entire life, is this one very small potential meeting or whatever, this one thing in the context of your life and your career, how important is it really? And what would happen if you show up at 80% or 95% or 80% or 70? Yeah. And so what would you maybe ask? I mean, you put me on the spot. I don't know. It depends on the client.
Okay, so I would think, first is, so what are you getting out of it, right? And so the second question would be, how is this benefiting you? Or why, how, not how it's benefiting you, but what makes you believe that this is going to benefit you in the long run? Because perfectionism doesn't last that long, right? It can only last so much. Exactly. And on top of that, what is perfection to you or for you? Because let's be honest, perfectionism does not exist. There's no such thing as perfect. There's near to, but there's no perfection. There's a value that we have to give to ourselves, probably, I would suggest, is to build upon your values, what is most important to you, because perfectionism can also keep you away from family and friends, right? So I would go into that part of the person, based on what we're having as conversation. What are they trying to improve in their life, and what is not working for them? So most probably, sometimes perfectionism is what a lot of leaders come because they cannot sustain it anymore. They're having trouble with being micromanagers, right? And here comes the part where we hear the employees don't leave companies, they leave managers, right? And so this is where a lot of people don't realize that they're missing out on opportunities of retaining talent because perfectionism is drowning people. It is prohibiting creativity. It is, it is just keeping people from thinking, from being independent thinkers. And so for me, when I think about perfectionism, it becomes more scary. And I think about how it can block me and prevent me from writing, from achieving the things I want to achieve. And setting my goals in a more realistic way is also the best way. Speaking of goals, of our last week's topic, it just helps me be more realistic when I just leave it to the side and say, look, things are not going to be perfect, because there's perfect for you is not going to be the same as perfect for me, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just have to let it go. I just have to go step by step by step. And then the closer I get, in reality, things change. So you're never going to reach perfectionism, because things change and evolve every single day. That's another thing you have to keep in mind. Things change. So there's no such thing as perfection. So that's what I was thinking about. That's what I would do. And like you said, it depends on the topic. It depends on the moment. And I hope that people are finding value in this, because perfectionism is the enemy of art, of creativity.
Progress over perfection is a good one, because here maybe a point to make is it's one thing if you strive for personal perfection. Okay, that's you and yourself, right? So it's okay. But it's a whole different thing if you impose your idea of perfection on people around you. Yeah. That is a whole different can of worms, because ultimately that is as arbitrary as your belief system is. And on top of it, it's judgmental. It's judgmental because you are not perfect up to my standards, or you don't do things up to my standards. It's wrong, or it's bad, or whatever. You pass judgment. Now, imagine you have a leader like that that has a very fixed idea of what perfectionism is. They're very often those micromanagers, not always, obviously, but they're very often those micromanagers, because in order for the outcome to be the way that they want, they cannot give up control, and you end up with a spoke and wheel or wheel and spoke kind of leadership dynamic. And they control everything extremely tightly. And yes, then this one person curbs the creative juices of all the people around them. And so, that's a whole different can of worms, and something that we do still see, even in today's day and age, where we hope that leadership is getting more enlightened, and that, especially also, let's say, in the advent of a more agile kind of way of doing things, that growth mindset in the collective is kind of at the base of that. Let's do our best. Let's learn from it. Let's iterate. But if you have truly one of those very strong perfectionists at the helm of something like that, it's not as powerful as a strategy as it could be, or as a framework. So perfectionism in and of itself, and it's just limited to yourself, okay, then you have to live with it. But if it impacts other people, which very often it does, then it's a whole different kind of thing.
I wanted to mention something. Thank you for that. And I apologize if I put you on the spot, by the way.
That's okay. It's what we're here for. It's I never hesitate with coming up with the question when I'm coaching, yes. But when you hypothetically like that, like the one question to address all perfectionistic clients, that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
That is true. I wanted to mention that I remember when I was OCD. I still am a little bit OCD, but it like I said, it with coaching and taking coaching classes, it improved my life quite a lot. And I remember I was telling my husband the other day that I remember that one of the enemies of perfectionism is patience. I can tell you as an experience for me, and I'm going to tell you a little bit really quick anecdote really fast. So when I arrived here to Saudi Arabia almost 9 years ago, I remember that I would have an expectation of how houses would be cleaned, right? The helper, how she would do it. She would do it exactly how I wanted it and everything else. When I came here, I was expecting for people to do it the same way. And you have no idea how many fits I would throw because, the bathrooms were not being clean like I wanted. It doesn't mean that they were not clean. It just meant that they were not being cleaned how I wanted it. So in my eyes, it wasn't clean, right? And I had issues, I had problems, I had people leaving. It's just because they don't want to do the work, they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that. And then I realized that my problem was patience. I didn't have the patience to teach people or have the patience to understand the cultural differences, right, of what meant for them clean and what meant for me clean. And then on top of that, here in Saudi Arabia, there's so many cultures and so many people that do these kind of services that you have to be patient. You have to understand that not everything is going to be like you want it. You want perfect, do it yourself. Basically, that's what my mom used to tell me. You want to do it right, do it yourself. But even then, right, we already said there's no such thing as perfect. So that was that I wanted to share because I remember that as I worked on my patience, those expectations of what I wanted versus what I was getting started to even out. And I still get a clean house. a nice house, not smelly, nice smelling house. And that's now good enough for me because I'm busy doing other things. And that's another thing. When you don't have anything else to think of, sometimes you hyper focus on one thing, which makes it, you want to do it. So other things that you can do on the side, you might kind of control your perfectionism a little bit and give yourself a little bit of patience. Just think about that part.
Yeah, or even just the patience to let people do their thing, because maybe if you sorry if I say you, but if a person like that wouldn't jump to conclusions and would let this cleaning person do their method of cleaning, maybe in the end the bathroom would be clean. But you see that the process of reaching the outcome is different. The method of working is different. You immediately jump to the conclusion, this can't possibly work. This can't possibly work. It's not going to be perfect. Yeah, so we see like everything. And this is actually a coaching topic we see in people, that they grapple with perfectionism, that they grapple with, authentically showing up. So it can become very complicated and very deep very quickly. And so that is also why there is no one size fits all coaching. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Every coaching should, at least in principle, be as unique as the person showing up for it.
Correct. Well, what do you think, Claudia? It's 8:56 here in Saudi Arabia. That would be
6:56 over here.
6:56 for you. What do you think?
I think this was fun. I hope that, people listening to this would find some value in it. If they do, please, folks, show us some love, subscribe to the channel, give us a like or a comment. And, it was absolutely our pleasure. Yes. And Sandra, good job.
Thank you. And good job to you.
The next one. Okay, bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. Ciao.
Happy Thanksgiving.